You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. They make it super simple. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with coverage options tailored to your choices. Plus, you'll see which discounts you may qualify for, like the online quote discount or savings for paying in full. In fact, 99% of Progressive Auto customers earn at least one discount. See if you could save when you switch to Progressive. You'll feel good about making a savvy choice. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little extra cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
To enjoy this episode of Forensic Tales ad-free, check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/Forensic Tales.
Forensic Tales discusses topics that some listeners may find disturbing. The contents of this episode may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
For 3 years in the early 1980s, the Minnesota police were confronted with a strange case. 3 women had been murdered and another brutally attacked. After each one, an anonymous caller, soon dubbed the Weepy-Voiced Killer, would call the police to confess to the crimes. This is Forensic Tales, episode number 242, The Weepy-Voiced Killer. Welcome to Forensic Tales. I'm your host, Courtney Fretwell Areola. Forensic Tales is a weekly true crime podcast with a forensic science twist. Each episode features real stories highlighting how forensic science was used, from fingerprinting to criminal profiling to DNA. Some cases have been solved with forensic science, while others have turned cold. Every story sends us a chilling reminder that not all stories have happy endings. As a one-woman show, your support helps me find new compelling cases, conduct in-depth fact-based research, and produce and edit this weekly show. You can support my work in 2 simple ways. Become a valued patron at patreon.com/Forensic Tales and leave a positive review. Before we get to the episode, we've got a few new Patreon supporters to thank this week. Charlotte M., JC, Luis B., Donna L., Misty J., Kim N., and Peter L. Thank you all so much. Now, let's get to this week's episode. Between 1980 and 1982, at least 4 women had been attacked, leaving 3 of them dead. After each one, an anonymous caller would call into the police to confess. He would say things like he was sorry for the attacks or that the voices inside of his head made him do it. But after each confession, he would hang up before saying who he really was. Then in 1982, one of his victims got away, leaving him injured. When he called to get medical help, the police recognized the voice as the man that they had dubbed the Weepy-Voiced Killer. This is the full story behind these strange phone calls and the psychology of the man who made them. The first victim was Karen Potak, a young college student. On December 31st, 1980, Karen met with her sisters in St. Paul, Minnesota for a New Year's Eve party. Shortly after the clock struck midnight, signaling the new year, she wandered out of the bar that she was at with her sisters into the freezing cold Minnesota winter night, holding a glass of champagne in one hand. As she was about to turn down an alley, a man in his car pulled up next to her. He noticed she wasn't wearing a jacket, so he offered to give her a ride wherever she wanted to go. He told her she didn't have to walk home alone in the freezing cold Minnesota weather. Karen thought about it for a second. It was a really cold night, and the heater inside of the car sounded pretty tempting. So she jumped into the passenger seat without thinking twice. This guy seemed nice enough. 3 hours later, the police received a phone call at 3 a.m. from a man saying that there was, quote, a girl hurt near the Malberg Manufacturing Company machine shop on Pierce Butler Road, an area completely dark and deserted at that time of the morning.
Yes, please, this is an emergency. Please send a squad to Pierce Butler Road, Malberg Manufacturing Company machine shop. Please, there's an ambulance too. There's a girl hurt there.
Can you tell me what happened to her?
When the cops showed up, they found Karen. She was lying partially naked on a snowbank near the railroad tracks. She had been bludgeoned with a tire iron at least 10 times, and her skull was almost completely cracked. She was taken by ambulance to the hospital, where she ultimately survived the attack, but not without major brain trauma. She wasn't even able to remember what happened or who done this to her. So when the police tried to question her, she couldn't remember a single thing. 6 months later, the police received a second phone call. This time, it was from a man saying that he just stabbed someone with an ice pick.
Oh, you find me? I just stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing somebody.
On June 3rd, 1981, an 18-year-old and recent high school graduate named Kimberly Compton moved to the Twin Cities from Wisconsin to look for a job. That very same day, she was found murdered. Kimberly was from a small town of Pepin, Wisconsin, a place that still has less than 1,000 residents. After graduating from high school, Kimberly did what many other kids from small towns do. She packed her bags, hopped on a bus, and headed to the big city, hoping to find a job. She saw the city as her ticket to a better life. As soon as she got off the Greyhound bus, she looked for somewhere to eat. Lucky for her, there was a small diner called Mickey's right across the street from the bus station, so that's where she went. As she sat in the booth eating her food, there was a man sitting directly across from her in another booth. Like her, he was also enjoying his meal. He noticed that Kimberly was eating alone, so he took his food over to her booth and offered to sit down and eat with her. Since she just arrived in the big city, she didn't know anyone and simply thought that the man was being nice for offering to sit down with her. So after they finished eating, the guy offered to drive Kimberly around and show her the city. And once again, she thought he seemed really nice, so she agreed to go with him. A few hours later, her body was found. A group of teenagers were playing in a field near a freeway construction site in St. Paul when they discovered her body. She had wounds to her chest, stomach, inner thighs, and the medical examiner determined that she had been stabbed a total of 61 times with an ice pick and strangled with a shoelace, just like what the caller said. The police didn't know who she was until they found her Greyhound Depot locker key inside one of her pockets. They also learned that she had eaten her last meal at the diner across the street from the bus station. So they sent a couple of police officers there to interview some of the employees, but unfortunately no one remembered anything. At this point, the police had no idea what they were up against. They already had 2 victims, both young women, one dead, one alive but just barely, one beaten to death with an ice pick, which isn't exactly a common weapon, and after both crimes, the person responsible called into the police himself to confess. But in neither situation did the caller say who he was. It was almost like he wanted to confess, but not to the point where he would get caught. So it had become this sort of cat and mouse game. The police didn't find many clues at either crime scene. Besides the phone calls, they really didn't have anything. No DNA, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, nothing really. But just when the cops thought that they might be at a dead end, they got another phone call. Just 48 hours after Kimberly's body was found, the police got this. "I don't know why I had to stab her. I'm so upset about it." He kept saying how sorry he was for doing it, and he even promised to turn himself in. But, of course, he didn't follow through. The next day, June 6th, he called the police yet again. This time, he wanted to complain that a local newspaper that covered Kimberly's murder got some of the details wrong, and then he hung up. A few days later, June 11th, he called again. This time in what sounded like a weepy crying voice, he says this.
Don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry what I did to Compton. I couldn't help it. Don't know why I had to stab her. I am so upset about it. I keep getting drunk every night. I can't believe it. It's just like a big dream. I can't think of being locked up. If I get locked up, I'll kill myself. I'd rather kill myself than get locked up. I'll try not to kill anybody else.
When the phone calls first came in, the police thought they had to be from a prank caller, a teenager playing some sick joke. But when the caller said that he killed Kimberly with an ice pick, they knew it couldn't be from a prank caller. That's because they never shared that part with the media. They intentionally left that part out of the story so that no one but the killer would have known that. During most of the phone calls, the police tried to trace where the calls were coming from, but most of them were too short. Or by the time they figured it out, the caller wasn't there anymore. After the one they got on the 11th, the police traced it to a bus depot phone booth. But by the time that officers got there, the caller was long gone. He was smart enough not to make any of the phone calls from his own house or from the same location twice. With virtually nothing else to go on, the police released a portion of one of the phone calls to the media, urging anyone who might recognize the voice to call in a tip. But this was a tricky one. The caller wasn't really talking in his quote-unquote usual voice. Like you can hear in some of these recordings, he was more crying than talking. And at times, it's even hard to understand what exactly he's saying. At first, the police received a lot of tips. Dozens of people called in saying that they thought they recognized him. But unfortunately, none of them turned out to be credible. So it was a good try, but in the end, the police were back at square one. After Kimberly Compton's murder, no one heard from the Weepy-Voiced Killer for about a year. But during that time, the cops thought they might have had a breakthrough. A man named Alan Lopez came forward and confessed to her murder. 2 months after her death, the police were called to a scene where Alan Lopez was holding his family hostage. And during the negotiations, he told the officers that he was the person responsible for the murder of Kimberly Compton. But there was a huge problem with his confession. Alan Lopez was in the Ramsey County Jail on the night that Kimberly Compton was murdered, so there was no way he could have done it. Alan Lopez eventually ended up committing suicide in a state mental facility, and the phone calls to the police continued. By the summer of 1982, the Weepy-Voiced Killer was back. On August 6, 1982, a paper boy stumbled upon something while out on his paper route. A body was sprawled out on the banks of the Mississippi River. The victim was soon identified as 40-year-old nurse Barbara Simmons. She'd been stabbed more than 100 times. Before she was killed, Barbara enjoyed the evening at a local bar, the Hexagon Bar in Minneapolis. She spent the night on the dance floor, having a few drinks and meeting new people. One of the people she met was a guy who was also at the bar alone that night. The two started talking, dancing, and drinking together. And at one point, Barbara told one of the bartenders that she hoped the guy was okay because he was going to give her a ride home that night. Hours later, her body showed up at the river. According to the Minneapolis police, quote, she was beaten and stabbed. The wounds on her body were circular. They could have been made with a Phillips screwdriver or an ice pick. Just like in the other two cases, the killer called the police to confess just 2 days later. This is what he said.
Fire emergency.
Please don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. Kimberly Compton was the first one. Oh, my safe. Oh, I don't know what's the matter with me. I'm sick. I'm going to kill myself, I think.
Where are you?
I'm just going to... If somebody dies with a red shirt on, it's me. I killed both of you. I'm sorry. I'll never make it to heaven.
So not only was he confessing to Barbara's murder, but he was once again confessing to Kimberly's. At this point, the Minneapolis police knew that they had a serial killer case on their hands. So the police in Minneapolis reached out to the FBI to see if they could send some agents to help work on the case. And the first thing they did was create a psychological profile of their guy. And this is what they came up with. FBI profiler Kimberly Masnick thought that during the phone calls, the killer was, quote, going into a juvenile state, crying it out. She also thought that it had to be someone who liked playing this sort of cat and mouse game with the cops. He was almost enjoying the fact that he could get caught at any second. The waitresses at the Hexagon bar where Barbara Simmons was last seen gave the police a description of the guy that she was seen talking to that night. Once they had that, they went back and started digging through mugshots of every offender with a history of violent assaults, narrowing them down to an 8-photo lineup. After that, Detective Brown from the Minneapolis Police Department had the bar staff go through the mugshots and see if any of them were their guy. And that's when they finally identified the man who was with Barbara that night, 37-year-old Paul Michael Stefani. If Paul Stefani really was the guy that Barbara was seen talking to at the bar the night that she was murdered, then that probably meant that he was the last person to see her alive. So naturally, the police wanted to sit down and speak with him, especially after they found out that he offered her a ride home. But before they could do that, they did a little digging around into his background. And that's when they discovered that he had worked at the Mauberg Manufacturing Company, the same location where Karen Potak had been attacked on New Year's Day. He also had a previous conviction for aggravated assault, which is why the police had his photograph. From that very moment, Paul Stefani became prime suspect number 1, not only in Barbara Simmons' murder, but also in Karen's case and Kimberly Compton's. The police began tailing him, installing a surveillance team outside of his apartment to keep an eye on his every move. Anytime he left his apartment complex, they would know about it. But somehow, despite all the eyes on him, Stefani got away. The police lost track of him after he left his apartment complex sometime on the night of August 21st, 1981. They saw him leave the apartment and head toward downtown Minneapolis, but after that, they lost sight of him, which gave him the green light to strike again. A few hours later, a guy called the police saying that he just witnessed a woman being stabbed by someone with a screwdriver. He said he tried to jump in and do something, but the suspect threatened him with the screwdriver and eventually fled the scene in his vehicle. When the cops showed up, they found 21-year-old Denise Williams, and this is what she had to say about the entire ordeal. Denise initially told the police that her name was Mary because she had an open warrant out for her arrest for a probation violation, and she didn't want the police to know who she really was. She also said that she was hitchhiking when she was attacked, but eventually Denise came around and told the truth. Her name wasn't Mary, it was actually Denise Williams, and she wasn't hitchhiking, she was a sex worker. She told the police that while out on the streets, a guy pulled up next to her at Hennepin and 6th Street, asking her about her services. She told him what the deal was and agreed to get into the car with him. They drove around for a little bit, but she started to sense that something was wrong when the guy started driving through a dark suburban area rather than returning her back to the city where he originally picked her up from. When she asked him to pull over so she could get out of the car, that's when she said the driver pulled out a screwdriver from the car's glove compartment and started attacking her with it. In the end, the man stabbed her a total of 15 times. But during all of this, Denise fought back. She kicked, she punched at him, she bit him at one point. She tried anything and everything she could just to get out of this car. She eventually found a glass bottle inside of the car and used it to hit him over the head, causing huge injuries to his face and head. That's when she reached for the car handle and finally got out of the car. But her attacker still went after her. It wasn't until a good Samaritan named Douglas Panning heard what was happening and ran over to help. Denise was taken to the hospital for emergency surgery, and despite being badly injured, she survived. After hearing all of this, the police showed her a picture of Paul Stefani. Everything about this matched his MO. Stabbing, the use of a screwdriver, a young female victim, everything. And sure enough, Denise Williams ID'd him. She didn't even have to think twice. She knew it was him. Within just a couple of hours of that attack, another phone call came into the police. It wasn't to confess or anything like that, but instead, it was someone saying, "I need an ambulance. I'm all cut up, I got beat up, and I'm bleeding." Now, who was that caller? Well, none other than Paul Stefani. Investigators were completely stunned that their prime suspect just picked up the phone and called the police himself. But he had no other choice. The glass bottle that Denise Williams hit him with injured him so badly that he had no other choice but to call 911. And that's the call that confirmed Paul Stefani was in fact the Weepy-Voiced Killer, linking him to the Denise Williams attack and the murder of Barbara Simmons. They knew it had to be him because when they sat down and questioned him at the police station, Stefani initially claimed that he was the victim of a robbery and that's how he got hurt. But when they confronted him with the Weepy-Voiced Killer case file containing photographs of all of his victims, Stefani got up from his seat at the table and said something like, "You're not going to pin those on me." And according to detectives, his voice instantly changed when he said that. He went from having a completely normal tone of voice to a high-pitched cry. And right away, they recognized that voice. It was the same tone of voice that they heard on all those phone calls. Stefani was then officially arrested and charged with the assault of Denise Williams and the murder of Barbara Simmons, to which he pleaded not guilty in both cases. According to Tom Foley, the Ramsey County District Attorney, they also believed that he had killed Kimberly Compton and assaulted Karen Potak, but they didn't have quite enough evidence to charge him, not yet anyway. When the case went to trial, it was pretty much a slam dunk for prosecutors. They had no problem getting the jury to convict Paul Stefani, aka the Weepy-Voiced Killer, on both charges. He was sentenced to 18 years for the attack on Denise Williams and 40 years for the Barbara Simmons murder, which for him meant that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. So who exactly is the Weepy-Voiced Killer? And what made him a serial killer? Well, here's everything we know about him. Paul Michael Stefani was born the second of 10 children in a Catholic family on September 8, 1944 in Austin, Minnesota. His mother remarried when he was 3, giving him a stepfather who was known to apparently sometimes throw his stepchildren down the stairs, which probably explains where he learned to be violent. According to the Star Tribune, Stefani moved to St. Paul in the mid-1960s, where he worked as a shipping clerk and janitor. He was briefly married to a woman named Beverly Leiter and even had a daughter with her, but he eventually got divorced and left both of them behind. And that's when the start of his serial killing began. On the outside, Paul Stefani looked like this all-American devout Catholic. But on the inside, something else was brewing. He was starting to have dark and disturbing thoughts about wanting to hurt people. Later on, he would claim that before every assault he committed, he would hear voices telling him to do it. But then his religious side would take over, making him feel guilty about what happened. And that's when he would pick up the phone and call the police. So it was like the devil was on one of his shoulders, saying to brutally attack and murder young, innocent women, but he also had an angel on the other shoulder saying, "Hey, what are you doing? You need to call the cops." But in the end, it was always the devil that won. Because no matter how many times he called the police on himself, he never revealed who he really was. And he may have sounded really remorseful for what he had done, hence the weepy voice, but it was never enough to actually do anything about it. Until he was on his own deathbed. If the summer heat has you worrying about the strength of your deodorant, then you need to listen up. Since I've started wearing Lumi deodorant, I've never had to worry about that because it's clinically proven to block odor all day. Now, you might not know this about me, but I wear a lot of black. It's just one of my favorite colors. But I've always had to worry about those annoying white streaks all over my tops. And no matter what I did, I just couldn't get all of it off. But now that I'm wearing Lumi deodorant, I never get those marks. And I can wear all my black clothing, no problem. Plus, it smells great with scents like clean tangerine, lavender sage, or toasted coconut, and it doesn't leave any weird residue on my skin. Lumi Starter Pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get 15% off all Lumi products with our exclusive code. And if you combine the 15% off with the already discounted starter pack, that equals over 40% off their starter pack. Use code Courtney for 15% off your first purchase at LumiDeodorant.com. That's code Courtney at LumiDeodorant.com. More than a decade after he was convicted at trial, Stefani was diagnosed with terminal skin cancer and told by the doctors that he only had a few months to live. So right after that, he seemed to have a change of heart. He reached out to law enforcement from behind bars to confess to everything. He just wanted one thing in return: a photograph of his mother's headstone. In exchange for the images that he wanted, on December 19th, 1997, he confessed to the 2 attacks that he had been charged and convicted of. But he also confessed to 2 more cases, including that of Kimberly Compton and attacking Karen Potak, telling the Star Tribune, quote, "Since I've been locked down the last 15 years, I've wondered how all this could have happened. And all I can say is I'm sick and I'm sorry. If sorry means anything after 15 years. But even more interesting was when he confessed to another murder that the police hadn't even connected him yet. That's because in that case, he didn't call the police after doing it like he did all the others. He said he didn't remember who the woman was. He only remembered that she had drowned in a bathtub. That victim turned out to be Kathleen Greening, who died in a bathtub on July 21st, 1982. To find out who she was, the police researched all freshwater drownings in the time frame that he was talking about. And after days of searching, they found a case they believed was a match: Kathleen Greening. Before she was killed, she was a 33-year-old school teacher. WCCO-TV reporter Caroline Lowe told the producers of the Oxygen Network show Mark of a Killer that the police knew they had their guy in Kathleen's case because, quote, Paul Stefani had details that only the killer would know. He had specifics about the victim's apartment, end quote. They also had something else. When the police reviewed the evidence and examined Kathleen Greening's address book, they found Paul S. alongside his phone number. So there was no question that she was one of his victims. Even though Stefani finally confessed, he still didn't offer any insight into his motivations. The only thing he has said is that the voices inside of his head told him things like, "Paul, it's time to kill." He also said that after one of the murders, he went to a Catholic church and, quote, sat in the back of the pew and cried. He said, "Mother always told me, if something hurts, go to God," adding that he wanted to come clean about the murders, but he only decided to do so after being diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he was right. 1 year later, on June 12, 1998, Paul Stefani, a.k.a. the Weepy-Voiced Killer, died inside the Oak Park Heights maximum security prison facility at the age of 53. Now let's talk about the forensic psychology behind all of it. We already know that Paul Stefani got his nickname because of the bizarre, high-pitched voice phone calls that he would make to the police after each one of his crimes. During the first few phone calls, the police weren't even sure if the caller was male or female. It took several more calls for them to finally put the pieces together that this was definitely a male. And as you can tell by listening to some of these clips in this episode, he's really hard to understand at times. But what also makes him an especially unique serial killer is the sheer brutality of his attacks. He stabbed his victims anywhere from 60 up to 100 times with either an ice pick or a screwdriver, not your typical choice of murder weapons. In another, he left his victim beaten so badly that she barely remembers the attack and remembers nothing about who did it to her. We could probably say that he first learned to be violent from his stepfather, who we already know was known to throw his kids down a flight of stairs if he got mad enough at him. Then throughout his adult life, he never really seemed to find his place. He got married, but divorced. He became a father, but left his daughter too. He worked several different jobs at a lot of different companies, but never really seemed to settle down anywhere. And he was even fired a few times, including from his janitor position at that Malberg manufacturing company in 1977. And let's not forget, that's where his first victim was found. It was also around this same time that he started drinking heavily. As far as his confession goes, a decade after his conviction, I think that speaks to his MO. He would commit these awful crimes, then simply pick up the phone and call the police to tell them what he had done. And I think he pretty much did the same thing years later. He wanted to confess and appeal to his Catholic upbringing. I also think the confessions were part of his cat and mouse game. He liked picking up the phone and telling people what he did, knowing that he might get caught one day. It certainly wouldn't be the first time that a serial killer did something to intentionally get caught. He said during the killing of Kathleen Greening, he felt like he was playing a game. He would be smiling and then a few seconds later ask himself, "What are you doing? She's dying." He himself didn't understand that why he would pick someone up at a restaurant and then 15 minutes later he would start stabbing them. He just didn't understand why he was doing it. Now, the only difference in this case with Kathleen Greening was that Paul Stefani never called in about this crime like he did all the others. There was something different about that one. We also don't know why he selected the victims that he did. Maybe they were simply victims of opportunity. He saw that they were alone or vulnerable and took advantage of that. But his victims had a few things in common. One, they were all relatively young females. And two, all of his victims were wearing the color red when they were attacked. So what was it about the color red that seemed to set him off? When reporters would go to the prison to interview him, most of them said that he looked like a completely ordinary guy. If you didn't know about his case or his history, you would never know that he was this prolific serial killer. He just looked like any other guy, someone's dad or someone's husband, which seems to fit with a lot of serial killers that we know. BTK, the Golden State Killer, they were all described as quote-unquote ordinary guys. Caroline Lowe, the same reporter that we talked about earlier, said this about that, quote, "Serial killers and rapists can look so ordinary. You think they're going to look like the bad guys from CSI, but you never know what you're going to face," end quote. If you want to hear more about the Weepy-Voiced Killer, it's been covered in several different true crime documentaries, shows, and podcasts just like mine. One of the most detailed ones is the Oxygen Network show Mark of a Killer that featured the case on its 7th episode titled Killer Caller. What do you think motivated the Weepy-Voiced Killer? Was it his relationship with his violent stepfather? Or was it because of his conflicting relationship with religion? What was it about the color red that seemed to set him off? And do you think he actually felt remorse for his crimes? How do you explain the forensic psychology behind the Weepy-Voiced Killer? To share your thoughts on this week's episode, follow the show on Instagram and Facebook. To find out what I think about the case, Sign up to become a patron at patreon.com/forensictales. After each episode, I release a bonus episode sharing my personal thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Forensic Tales so you don't miss an episode. We release a new episode every Monday. If you love the show, consider leaving us a positive review. You can also help support the show through Patreon. Thank you so much for joining me this week. Please join me next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings. Forensic Tales is a Rockefeller audio production. The show is written and produced by me, Courtney Fretwell Areola. For a small monthly contribution, you can help create new compelling cases for the show, help fund research, and assist with production and editing costs. For supporting the show, you'll become one of the first to listen to new ad-free episodes and gain access to exclusive content. To learn more, please visit patreon.com/Forensic Tales. Forensic Tales is a podcast made possible by our Patreon producers: Tony A., Christine B., Sherry A., Michael D., Nicola, Jerry M., Brian W., Megan G., Ureli, Jerry, Ann F., Ken S., Carol A., Luis B., and Marianne C. If you'd like to become a producer of the show, head over to our Patreon page, or send me an email at courtney@forensictales.com. For a complete list of sources used in this episode, please visit forensictales.com. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.